This guy trained zone 2 for 90 days. Let's see what happens.
My body's ability to burn fat has drastically changed. How do I know? I went to a sports lab and measured it. And then I did 3 months of zone 2 training for running. And then I went to a sports lab again and I measured to see how it had changed. Here are my results.
Day 1, okay.
So the first step was capturing my initial data. I went and did a metabolic test with Nikki. This is the overall data and numbers that we saw. And the biggest feedback that she gave.
Okay, let's see. So his zone 2 pace. That was his pace he was running, maybe. So zone 2 pace. Yeah, it looks like he was running 10:20, 10 minutes, 9:40, 9:22, 9:05, 9:48, or 8:49, 8:34, and got to an RPE of 7.5. So that is not zone 2. That is like more like lactate threshold. That 8:34. So it needs to be running, I would say, probably 9:22 or slower, but even a 10 minute or slower would be what he realistically needs to run. Heart rate especially, like I would say anything under 140 is good. Under 142 even is probably pretty good.
It means that I don't have a zone 2.
You know, zone 2 is your aerobic zone, right? And so based on this test, you don't have zone 2. Right? You haven't been training for a zone 2, right? And that's going to influence it for sure.
Essentially, when I'm running, there's no zone or space or heart rate area where I am burning more fat than carbs as my fuel source. So that's where the goal became, how can I train, how can I run in a certain way so that way I can create a fat burn zone 2 area. Next, I did a DEXA scan. I was around 199 pounds and about 17% body weight.
Okay, that's not bad.
I did some blood work through Inside Tracker. These were my baseline numbers, and we'll see how they changed at the end of the 3 months. Now, okay,
wait, did he say, let's go back and look at that. Let's go back and look at that. I want to look at his numbers.
You don't know what zone 2 is.
Let's go back.
And we'll see.
So his creatine, okay, 291, but his testosterone 700, that's pretty good. Mine's 795. 700 is a pretty good number. And the rest of the stuff, iron looks good, everything else looks good, hemoglobin looks good, triglycerides is low.
At the end of the 3 months. Now,
A1C is good. So
it's kind of this new
looks
viral
good
thing in the fitness wellness space.
Yeah, zone 2 is just running at a slower pace.
One is metabolic flexibility. Essentially, your body's ability to switch from burning carbs to burning fat as a fuel source. And the more metabolically flexible you are, right, being able to switch your fuel sources, the healthier you are and the overall better for
exactly.
2 for endurance training. So I do want to run a sub 3-hour marathon at some point before I die. I've read a lot of things about how zone 2 or aerobic base building can help create that foundation so you can work towards that goal. So if you want to be healthy long term and you want to achieve a certain athletic performance, zone 2 is valuable. But what is zone 2? When it comes to zone 2, you might hear like heart rate zones, training zones. There could be 3, there could be 5, there could be 6, 7 power zones. There's
usually there's 5, but
out there, so it can get confusing. Now, how I decided to define zone 2 training was from Dr. Peter Attia, and I'm going to butcher this, but Dr. Inigo San Millan.
Zone 2.
Zone 2. Zone 2.
He is considered the father of zone 2, and he trains a ton of elite cyclists, and they have a great podcast together, and that's where I got my information and data from. Your zone 2 is where you are able to output the maximum amount of power, so you're trying to run or cycle the fastest as possible while keeping your lactate between 1.7 to 1.9 millimoles, right under 2 millimole. And from what I could understand, this is a great proxy to
so basically it's anything where you're going slow to where you're going to a fast pace, like before lactate threshold. So if I talk about my lactate threshold runs before, it's before you build over your lactate threshold.
Body is burning the most amount of fat versus carbs. Is it perfect? Not really, but it's like close. And the idea is that you want to train at this low steady state, so that way
it's a low steady state so you can go for a long time.
ATP, and you're focusing as much on your aerobic system as possible. But the overall consensus is that you want to make your mitochondria, which is the powerhouse of the cell, is more efficient. So another way to measure this is one of those tests where you wear the mask and you can measure your CO2 versus oxygen output and potentially predict
this is a good test you could take as well.
How much you're burning carbs, and that's what I did at the beginning and at the end of these 3 months. Now, what's the protocol to follow? Inigo San Millan says that you want to do a 45-minute session up to a 90-minute session of zone 2 training.
Yes, that's good. I would say at least 30, but
2 sessions per week to maintain, 4, 5, and 6 to really push the needle forward. So
Yes.
I aimed for around 180 to 360 minutes of zone 2 training per week, which is 3 to 6 hours.
Okay.
Each session I tried to aim for 45 minutes to 90 minutes, depending on kind of how I felt that day and other life priorities. But that's not how I started. For the first few weeks, I aimed just to do 30 minutes of running because I just want to kind of get in the space of running. I hadn't run that much before. You don't want to just go run 90 minutes on your first day. That's a lot of running. Then there were some secondary factors that might not be as
You want to
important,
make sure you start out slow and then build your mileage up.
Tried to kind of incorporate them. And that was running in the morning where I was fasted. So my glycogen stores might be depleted and my body might be able to switch to a fat burning state much faster.
Yeah,
And 2
that's
is
a
I
good
optimized
idea.
my diet. Nikki gave me a great snack handout, and I was trying to eat fats or protein with any carbs that I consume. So if I was eating fruits, which are high in carbs, I would try to consume a fat or protein source. So peanut butter with banana, get my fat and my carbs. So now that I kind of had an idea of what zone 2 was, what my overall plan was going to be, the challenge began. Week 1 to 3. So the very first week, you know, I was new to running and I wanted to do zone 2 running.
Okay.
Because I want to run a marathon. So if you do
Yeah.
zone 2 in one type of
Zone
workout,
2
it
is
doesn't
perfect
really
for
bleed
that.
into the other kind. So if you want to do zone 2 cycling, it's not going to help your running as much. And
No,
for
that's
the
true.
metabolic test that I did, I realized that my kind of zone 2 where I was burning the most amount of fat was around like 136 to 142 range.
I
That's
do
what I
think
said.
45 pace is not a bad place for you, for sure, because you are burning the most fat there. Your fat calories drop significantly here, and the carb calories just like spike. You know, like that's a significant change. So I would definitely stay under the 905 for sure.
So I use that heart rate zone as
over the
proxy
905,
for
not
that.
under,
And in the Apple
but
Watch, you
yeah.
can set custom heart rate zones, so I did that.
Slower
And then
than
I set a
905.
notification, so anytime I dropped outside of these zones, whether it was the upper or lower bound, my watch would vibrate and let me know. And the reason I use the chest heart rate strap is
Cool.
because that's kind of the most accurate that you can find out there, and it like updates in terms of your heart rate as fast as possible.
Yeah,
Anything on your
Polar
wrist,
is a great
whether
one.
you're
Check
assault.
those
And the very
out.
first week, it wasn't easy, right? I had to walk and run at the same time. A lot of these sessions, I was like running for a little bit and then walking for a little bit. And I honestly felt demotivated. Like I grew up as a swimmer. I kind of like to identify as a somewhat athlete growing up, and just trying to have a steady state heart rate was extremely challenging.
Yeah,
But I
it
reminded
is. No, it's
myself,
hard.
why
When
am I
you're
doing this?
when you're out of shape, and especially when I've been out of shape, like I'll have to go run like 11 something minute mile just to keep my heart rate low.
It's for the video. But 2, can I actually increase my metabolic health? Can I have a strong cardiovascular system? Right?
Yeah,
I wanna create
you
a
wanna-
forever goal of longevity. I want to live
Exactly.
a long, healthy life. So
He looks
I kinda
pretty
need to go
fit.
through these steps to make that happen. I think anytime you're starting zone 2 training, especially if it's running focused, realize it's gonna be, you know, run walk for the first 2 to 3 weeks.
Yeah.
And that's how it was for me. Week 4 to 7. Now around week 4, I think I started to adapt, and my body just felt like I could actually run the entire time period. Yes, it took some time to finally be able to hit that 136, 142 heart range, which was custom to me. I was running like 10, 11 minute mile pace, nice and
Yeah,
slow.
10, 11, that's
easy.
what I'm
And
saying,
one thing
yeah.
that I realized is if I trained later in the day, or if I took caffeine before I ran, my heart rate was higher, so it was harder to be in that zone. So
Yes.
I try to minimize eating or caffeine before these runs, and if I did do it even later, I'd run even slower. And then even temperature, right? If it was
Yeah,
colder,
just go slow
it was
and
easier
easy.
to
Look
stay
at
in
he's
zone.
going
If it was
slow and
hotter,
easy.
like, my
Don't-
heart rate was
don't
even
worry
higher.
about
And I
going
still
super
love to do
fast.
strength training, and one thing that Dr. Attia mentions is that you actually want to do your strength training after a zone 2. Which could seem a little bit counterintuitive.
Yeah.
It just depends on what your goals are. But I end up doing like a 45-minute or 90-minute run, and then I would go straight into a strength training session because I was trying to optimize for everything. And if you're struggling to hit these like peak strength goals, yes, it's gonna hold you back. But I was prioritizing.
I think if you gotta prioritize. So if you're prioritizing running, go with the running first. But if you're prioritizing the weightlifting and the strength aspect of stuff, which we're obviously not on this channel, we're about running. Then you prioritize the strength training stuff.
the zone 2 training. So I would always do it before.
Yeah.
But what I realized is sometimes it actually felt like a good warm up, and I didn't really have any issues.
Yeah, you're not going
hitting
fast,
PRs
so it is a
or
good warm up.
pushing
It's
the
true.
weights that I really needed to push that day. But you actually don't get a lot of the zone 2 benefits if you try to do it right after a strength training or any kind of high intensity session. But these were the weeks where I really felt like I had this. Like I was day in, day out showing up. I was putting in the work. I'd wake up, put on my running clothes, do the run, come home, shower. It just felt like this routine where every day I just showed up and just did it. And then I realized, hey, I'm getting a double benefit: sunlight in the morning because I wear
sunlight in the
sunglasses
morning
all
is
day.
good.
I would try to go shirtless just to get some sun exposure on
That's
my
really
skin.
good for you
Everything
too, vitamin
felt
D.
Absolutely amazing. But then I hit week 8. Also, to see behind the scenes content, make sure to follow me on Instagram and Twitter at
Week 8. What happens week 8?
Before you go on YouTube. Week 8 to 11. I think what I didn't realize during these weeks is the impact, especially at like heavier body weight, that running has on your body. And it was kind of like building up, slowly building up, and my body was like aching, getting worse, it was getting tighter, and I wasn't taking the right steps to make sure
that stretch from what you gotta recover properly.
For a good number of years. I'm pretty mobile, I would think, but I wasn't doing a lot of yoga. I wasn't doing mobility work. I wasn't doing any stretching. And I could feel the tightness in my body was impacting my running, and I was getting a little bit of lower back pain. I had some weird pain around my ankles. Let's just push through it, right? No pain, no gain. And that's where things started to take a darker turn. Right, I don't know how much of it is also tied to eating healthy foods that don't cause inflammation, staying hydrated, getting enough salt and water. This whole entire Zone 2 training felt like a part-time job. It was almost 10 hours a week of running, showering, changing, and then on top of that doing strength.
It is a lot.
It was overwhelming, and I felt like I just didn't want to do it anymore. And the hardest part was that it was getting boring. Like, you're running at a very slow pace for an
Sorry, my camera died. Let's get back into the video.
hour and a half. Like, think about that. You're just running down a straight line, and I was like, this is so monotonous. How do I optimize my time? I had to figure out something else to do while running. And that's when I was like, okay, maybe I'll listen to a podcast. But then how do I take notes while running, listening to this podcast? Then I was like, maybe I'll call friends, right? This is a conversational pace. I should be able to catch up with friends. So I started to experiment with other
I like doing that
while doing the Zone 2 run. And then I added a combination of VO2 max and track workouts, and I was really pushing my upper bounds while building that aerobic base. And as someone who grew up hating running, like I was a swimmer and we had running workouts twice a week, and I asked my coach if I could skip those workouts. Like, that's how much I've always disliked running. And now
that's pushing himself,
like 40 miles per week of running. It felt like it was nothing. I was like, oh, that's easy, you know, we're going at it. And then boom, that lack of proper warm-up, the lack of stretching on off days, like probably poor running mechanics, not eating healthy whole foods, led to some kind of tendonitis in my ankle. But I had to finish the challenge. And that's when we got to week 12. So I kept running all up until the test. Even at this test on week 12, like I could feel something was wrong, but I was like, I need to get this test done. And that was the last week where I had these 4 miles, and I haven't run one.
So you don't want to do that necessarily. You always want to make sure that you are, if you are training for a race, you want to make sure that you're, if you're training for something like this, like obviously he was almost done, so you want to kind of do that. But if you're training for like a long term, you want to make sure you take off time, you stretch, warm up properly, and you make sure you're stretching after and icing and doing all the things you need to be doing to recover properly. Which I'll do a whole video on recovery and stuff like that later on, but for now, just do that.
Now, what are the things that I noticed overall? One was like my heart rate was a lot lower when I was working. Whether it was weightlifting.
Definitely heart rate will get lower.
Heart rate was noticeably lower.
What I've noticed when I was in really good shape, I'm not in really good shape right now because I have an ankle injury, so I've kind of gotten out of shape. But when I was in really good shape, what I noticed with my training was that it was super easy to do like higher intensity like bodybuilding stuff, and I could do a lot of supersets and a lot of like other things to build muscle, and it was really fun to do.
150 sometimes in the sauna, and now I was barely hitting like 120, 130.
Yeah, it's really good.
I asked friends who didn't run, like our heart rates maybe would peak together, but now like I was on a different level. Too, I felt a lot more energized. Like just doing these.
Oh, a lot more energy for sure.
Out of me, whereas like some strength training can. But I felt like I had this like high, this endorphin, and I was able to be more productive.
Yes, get more stuff done. I feel like definitely.
I also became extremely hungry.
Yeah.
Eat a lot more. So. Grocery bill went up. And the final thing was
eat
I would
more.
feel really tight because I wasn't doing warm-ups, was not doing mobility work. I would run, come home, sit at a desk for all day. And
that was not
good.
That was not good.
I had issues in my ankle. It just felt like there's a
you
lot
need to
more
recover properly.
So I
cool
really
downs, all that recovery stuff.
Understanding how my body feels and adjusting my workouts as needed. Right? Although like Zone 2 training might
I want to see his results though.
Your cardiovascular system. It does put a lot of load on your tendons, your ligaments, your muscles. Every time my foot slams on the floor, right, I think it's like 7 to 8 times your body weight of force is going
not
back
7 to 8, but it's a lot though.
In terms of how much
2.5 times I think is when you land.
Like 15 pounds heavier than I was then. Running was going to put even more force on my body.
Yeah.
But these are my final results. DEXA scan. Most of the data was kind of the same. My weight is approximately the same. My body composition still around 17-ish%.
Okay.
I maybe fluctuated.
Me 8 more, so you would think about
pounds, but that could just be margin of error. And then in my blood work, you can see my testosterone drop, my cortisol drop.
Cortisol drop.
Triglycerides also drop.
So the iron dropped by a lot. That's weird. Must have been something. His testosterone dropped, It drops some, but you know, you're aging, and if you don't do stuff, you know, like I don't know if he's not doing as much weightlifting or something like that, maybe that's why it dropped. I don't really know. That's a decent amount to drop. And then, like I said, iron drops, his cortisol dropped, which is great, less stress, which you would think it would be more stressful to run all the time, but it does help lower your cortisol.
Dropped. So that could also
and
be
triglycerides, which is great. 56 is a good triglyceride, so good job.
Even more, I was losing certain things. But I think getting your blood work done is really important. Either get it through your doctor, and if not, use Inside Tracker. It's linked below. Helps support the channel. I showed up to another testing facility here in New York and had an amazing person, Polly, just absolutely brilliant, who took us through this test.
Okay, let's see what
it
it
says. Lactate testing to measure kind of where did my 2 millimole lactate change throughout. We'll kind of just look at my heart rate. So at a 142 beats per minute heart rate, my original pace was 905.
Okay.
The 3-month mark, the new pace was 840.
Oh, wow.
So about 15 seconds.
That's really
faster at the
impressive.
same heart rate. And yeah, it's only 15 seconds, but you add that up over 26 miles, like that's minutes. And you add that up consistent training over
That's
months,
really good.
over years. Like there's so much more potential. And yeah, obviously it's probably not linear, but just seeing the change in the data was very inspiring. When you do strength training, you can see gains, you can see changes rather quickly. But one of the things I learned is aerobic-based training takes a long
Yes, it takes a while to build up, but once you build it up,
cases where I was actually burning a
it's
lot
really
more
nice.
fat than I was carbs. Just seeing how my body metabolically shifted was so inspiring and fascinating. I was like, I want to continue doing this. But because of that tendonitis, the injury in my ankle, I had to stop. I took a couple months off, and that's kind of what's leading into this marathon training series. I love that I did this experiment, and I'm going to continue doing a lot of zone 2 easy mileage work because I know it's going to set the foundation for my future marathons. Now, because excessive running can actually hinder some of your sex hormones like testosterone, due to the fact that like we're increasing cortisol and that's your stress hormone.
Yeah.
One thing I did experiment with was trying testosterone supplements. Like, can I maintain or increase my testosterone when I'm in these high intense training plans? So go watch this video where I tried
that's
testosterone
different,
supplements
but
like Tonka.
So, what do I think about Zone 2 training? I think it's one of the best trainings. I just call it easy running, which is a conversational pace, 60 to 75% of your maximum heart rate, upwards of 80% sometimes, and that's like marathon pace running. But I think Zone 2 training is great. I think it's a conversational pace. I think it's very good. Zone 1 is obviously more warm-up based, but Zone 2 is, I think, a great thing to be doing. And I think 80% of your weekly mileage should be Zone 2. Like, I think most of your running should be Zone 2. Like, I know when I coach high schoolers, it's not always Zone 2, you know, because they got workouts they gotta do and they don't run that much mileage. But if you're running, you know, for a 5K or anything like that, Zone 2 is a big one. So hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you guys did, please click that subscribe button and check out this video over here because YouTube thinks you're gonna like it.